among our first students at Crossroads.
Mhm.
And Kim, I'm trying to remember. I know that at one time Mary I poached you, and that was very impressive. But uh, how many years were you at Crossroads?
First 2 years,
First
7th,
2 years,
8th
the
grade,
2 years in Peacock Alley.
Peacock Alley.
And I have been at this for a couple of months, and I still cannot find anywhere a picture of Peacock Alley. So if you
Ah,
run across one, that'd be awesome. But you also found your essay for admission to Crossroads.
yep, yep.
Yep. So I got the first page that I could read,
Okay.
and
Well,
there
you
you
should
were
get that
talking
by
about
Monday.
Cuba.
I mailed it to you. You should get it by Monday.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Okay.
Um, but I mean, I can't wait to hear more about Cuba from that. But let's start. I want to a certain extent, do a little bit sequential. So, tell us where you went to school before Crossroads.
Before I was at Benton School, which was a public school on Kings Highway and St. Louis Avenue. I was there from kindergarten to 6th grade. And then in 6th grade, my mom moved to LaClede Town. And that's when I went to Waring for a couple of months. And then Crossroads.
Right. And your mom was she just seemed really resourceful, and
Yeah.
she clearly was looking for, whatever could happen that would bring out the best in you. And so
Yeah.
it was great to have her as part of the whole, Reynolds presence there at Crossroads.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you came to Crossroads, and it obviously was a little bit different from Benson or Waring. Can you tell us a little bit about that change?
It was so cool. I remember the first day walking in and the bins. Instead of lockers, we had these bright colored bins and
Yep.
finding one with your name on it. And you made it as junky as a locker over time because you kept shoving stuff in it. Um, but the other first thing I remember is Carol's math class, because it was in this room inside of the whole area, and we sat around tables instead of desks.
Right.
And she had all these cool games that I had never seen before to make math really fun and interesting. So I love games anyway. So to see all these pieces and what we were going to do with them, which is really fun. So
And I think, one of the things that we wanted to do was to look at that overlap between fun and learning. And
yeah,
yeah, I sometimes I think of it as kind of like a Venn diagram where one circle is fun and the other is learning, and the more overlap you have,
hmm
the more productive it really is.
yeah.
And I think, I mean, Carol had that special magic that to just come up with creative ideas and to have a real good sense as to what middle schoolers would love to do.
Right,
So
right.
yeah.
Yeah, she definitely made math fun. And then you had some kind of urban, I don't remember if it was called urban studies or something.
Yeah.
And we were doing maps in them, which I love maps and I buy all these books with maps still. But I remember making maps and I remember going around the industrial area, which was over on the other side of the school and down to what became LaClede's Landing. I guess it was still called LaClede's Landing back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I just remember that it was the first time school was out of the classroom, and yet it felt so much fun. Um, and yeah, that it was something every day I could come back home and tell my mom about something that we did or I learned. That was very new, a new experience.
Yeah, I mean, we had access to some of these maps. They were called stereoscopic maps, where with a certain kind of microscope, it wasn't a single lens, it was two, and
Yeah,
you could see things in 3D.
yeah.
And I have a friend who now works. He's been working for a number of years with what was then called the Defense Mapping Agency, and now it's National
Mhm.
Geo. And so they have those. And I said, you know, we were looking a lot at, if you remember, Interstate 44 in St. Louis and
Yes.
how it was breaking up neighborhoods. And we could see historically, how the neighborhoods had changed from those maps. And this friend of mine, Stafford, he was really resourceful in trying to find Peacock Alley. We were in Peacock Alley looking elsewhere,
hmm
and he looked back, in their library and couldn't find it, unfortunately. But yeah, so we were doing things like that. And how about the straight academics? Do you feel like it served you well?
It probably served me too well. I remember a lot of the, especially the English stuff. Well, even the math. I went right into high school in honors math and stayed that way. But then bad news happened with geometry, so I went from an A plus to an F. So something in my brain does not get geometry. Um,
Well, that's really odd considering woodworking, which we'll get to.
yeah.
Maybe
I
the practical
started a
application is
program in
what you
the
needed.
yeah, right. I started a program in the public schools because of that. But yeah, I don't understand what happened in my brain, but and even now when you say geometry to me, I get a little intimidated. So
Well, I didn't say it. You said you brought it up, but
and then
okay.
and then John taught a literature class that was sci-fi, which I had never been exposed to. And I remember 1984, and at the time thinking that sounded so far away. You know, it's like when you're trying to think of someone turning 50, you know, it just sounds like something far off. And it really wasn't at the time. We're talking about 1976, but yeah, that and Animal Farm and I think something Wicked This Way Comes was in that class. I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, because that was Bradbury, I'm sure it was. Um, so yeah, I remember that. And then Carol did a literature class, and she told us that when she was in college, you had to read that it was this intense experience where you had to read like the equivalent of 200 pages a day to keep up. And so she gave us this assignment where the aim was to read 200 pages a night. And I remember trying, I think we were all trying. I don't think anybody got to it. And I finally broke that habit about 10 years ago. Not
Of reading 200 pages a night?
yeah, of reading 200
Wow.
pages. I was still trying to, I could still hear Carol in that, and I was still trying to keep up with it. And then I said 10 years ago, okay, you don't have to do 200 pages a day, but you have to do 200 pages of a book before you give up on it. And even
Exactly.
that over time, as you get older, you're like, life is short. If you don't like the book,
I've got a lawnmower behind me. I'm going to close the window.
okay, just let it go.
Okay, hopefully that helps.
Okay.
And did you ever have a math class with Andy?
I don't remember a math class with Andy. I've been trying to figure that out other than Carol, but I just don't remember.
Okay,
Yeah.
because he was very creative as well and
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was a lucky time. And I just think you all lucked up on the right people at the right time because everybody there was creative and interesting and fascinating. And you gathered this group of kids who were all very different and interesting. And people who wanted to be there. There wasn't anyone who was forced to be there, so that was nice. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
before a little bit more on the students, um, you know, years after you had graduated from high school and college, the school really got involved in having its own newspaper. But you brought to my attention again about the Mill Creek Intelligencer and Cause, the guy who. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
um, I just remember I had always wanted to be a writer since I was 7, and so that newspaper was a great venue, and they let me do the article on the mural that the students created in the community center. Um, and then for 8th grade, we were able to do like a internship somewhere that we could come up with as an independent studies. And I worked for the St. Louis Sentinel newspaper as a reporter. And they sent me to a luncheon, the Vashon Yes I Can luncheon. And I got to cover that. And that was just an exciting thing that I felt like a real journalist. And I was there taking notes and following the photographer around. So
That's awesome. And for a while one of our classrooms, we were sharing space with the Intelligencer. Um and we could see layout being done and
yeah,
just
yeah,
the
he'd been
whole sense that Cause and others had to, oh my God, we've got a schedule to meet. We've got
there.
to,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
so are there any particular, have you maintained relationships with any students from then?
Lori. Lori Price and I
Oh, good.
still keep in touch. Um, yeah, she went full-time military after high school, and we kept in touch through that. And yeah, I she's now doing some travel stuff. So she's taking people on these cruises. But
Well, I have tried not too hard, but to reconnect with her, if you wouldn't mind, you know,
okay,
yeah, just letting her know and giving her my email or something. I'd love to bring her
yeah,
in because,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
she was
And one of
terrific.
the pictures I sent you was a picture of Lori, and I think that was Karen Wisemantel. Was that her name?
Yeah, Weiss Mantle. Yeah,
Um, at the camp at Camp Wayman or Camp Wyman. I don't know.
Wyman. Yeah, that out by
Okay.
Six Flags. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that was my first time ever going to camp. So Crossroads was my memory of a place of a lot of firsts. And I still have things to ask about. So I remember we made root beer, and I love root beer, but we also
Yeah.
did a dandelion wine, and that wasn't supposed to be ready for a while. And I was wondering, did it ever get ready? Did anybody ever drink it? Was it drinkable?
Yeah, I think it's in Andy's backyard now. I'm not quite sure. Uh,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
it reminds me of again later on we had a journalism teacher by the name of Cal Fussman,
Mm.
who are you in the LA part of California?
Yeah, I'm in LA.
Okay. Well, Cal became good friends with Larry King when he
Mm.
was still alive, and they had breakfast almost every morning together. But anyway, Cal had taught at um, Crossroads in sometime in the middle '80s, and when I found him, it reminded him that he had assignments from students from 40 years ago that he had not yet turned back, but he promised to do it soon. So I guess, unfortunately, it might be a characteristic of Crossroads. I hope not.
Okay. Okay. And the other thing was we did a time capsule we put in the ground.
Yes, and that was in LaClede Town, right?
Yep, that was in LaClede Town. But I figured with all the construction that happened afterwards.
It I mean, literally and figuratively bulldozed, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What a
And I
bummer.
don't even remember what I put in there, but I just remembered I had never heard of a time capsule. I had never seen it done. It was so exciting. And I kept over the years wondering about it. So
Oh, I wish it. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a great story. Well, um, so then Mary I, tell us a little bit about that.
Um, I think I was the fourth black person to graduate from Mary I, which was kind
Okay.
of a mind trip. Um, there were two black girls in my class, myself and Darcel Williams. Um, and I remember my mom saying, "You made friends at Crossroads, so it'll probably be lifelong, but you're going to Mary I for an education, and you'll probably class issues will sort you out in the end, and you won't end up with real friendships there." And it was true. Um, but it was just interesting that she had the foresight to say that, um,
It is. It
and
is indeed.
to put that out. And
But that had to be difficult. I mean, Crossroads was located in LaClede Town where you were living, which was an
right,
integrated area and it was valued. And you know, Mary I'm sure, was trying to get into the times
yeah,
with, I'm sure, a
trying to
lot of resistance
diversify.
from within the institution.
Right,
Um,
right,
yeah,
yeah.
it had not been that long before then that Andy, John, and I were all among people at Country Day next door to Mary
Ah, okay,
talking about how much we wanted integration to occur there, and it probably happened about the same time it did at Mary not
okay,
when we were there.
right,
So
yeah.
then college, that
Northwestern for my undergrad.
yeah,
Yeah. And started off as a journalism major. And then after freshman year, I called my mom and I said, "I'm in love with Chekhov. I'm changing my major." And she said, "I don't know who this Chekhov guy is, but I hope he can help you with your bills. Because I don't, doesn't sound like a stable life to me." Um, so yeah, at Northwestern, I was on the daily student newspaper freshman year because I called them that summer and said, I'm coming there and I want to write for the paper. And they said, "We don't take freshmen." And you can apply at the end of your freshman year. And they sent a newspaper that summer to, I guess, just to get people excited. And I remember taking a red pen and editing the newspaper. And I sent it back to them and I said, I still need that job on the newspaper. And that's how I got on the newspaper as a freshman.
Oh,
And
that's great.
then I did the news on the radio station, the campus radio, and then ended up the news editor for the radio station freshman year. So
Now, before we move from there to Chekhov, do you remember Kevin Villers from Crossroads?
yeah, yeah.
Well, Kevin went to Northwestern too.
No,
Yes,
we were there at the same time. I had
I
no
think you
idea.
were. And he was quarterback of the football team.
Oh wow.
So you had a coach there by the name of Dennis Green, who
Absolutely. I remember
African
that.
American, one of the
Yep.
first at a
I remember
major
that name.
college.
Yep.
And Dennis Green had said to Kevin when Kevin was at Soldan that if you come to Northwestern, I'm going to make sure you get a good chance to play quarterback because, so many African Americans were said, well, you may be okay, but you'd be better as a wide receiver. So
Right.
Dennis Green promised it to Kevin. Kevin, I can't remember whether it was his freshman or sophomore year. He started over half the games. He was good, not great. And then the next year, Dennis Green said, "I want to switch you to wide receiver." And Kevin then transferred to Weber State in Idaho, and he hung on a little bit, in the NFL and the Canadian League and all that. Anyway, in the last 20 years, he really wanted to get into education. He got a PhD in education. He is the principal now of a K through 12 school near Seattle, Native American reservation. Yeah,
That's a cool story.
it is. There is a video interview with him on the site.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
I'll have to
But I
check.
guess the two of you were at Northwestern together, and it was big enough to not know. Yeah,
Not know. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Uh,
So last scene at Northwestern, devouring Chekhov, and what happened after that?
after I never got cast at Northwestern in anything. That was a bummer. And I'd be told things like, well, I kind of thought of a blonde in that role or a redhead. And I was like, well, I could wear a wig. And I'd have all these arguments about, people they wouldn't be able to make the transition from seeing a black character on the stage. And I'm like, but when you walk in a theater, no one's real anyway. You've already, I mean,
Great way to put it. Yeah.
that's not Henry VIII up there. Whoa. Um, but so that was kind of a heartbreak. But I left there when I finished and moved back to St. Louis, and en route on an airplane, read an article about a woman stockbroker. And I thought that was something else I'd never heard of. No one in my family owned a stock or a bond. And I just thought that was fascinating and went out to get anything I could read about being a stockbroker, and started calling up the brokerage houses and saying, I want to be a stockbroker. And they all pretty much hung up the phone on me. And I was at a dinner party one night and met this woman from Texas, Deborah, I can't remember her last name. And she was a stockbroker. And I said, I want to do that, but I can't get in. And she said, darling, tomorrow you go and call those same brokerage firms and don't give them all that BS about you're interested in economics or all. She said, just tell them you want to make a lot of damn money. You got it? And I said, okay. And she said, no, I mean it. You say it just like that. I want to make a lot of damn money. She said, say it back. And I said, I want to make a lot of. And the next day I had 3 interviews with major brokerage firms.
God.
So it just happens. Life can be funny that you meet the people who can get you through the next door, and that's what you're always hoping to happen.
And so you got a
I
job.
didn't make a lot of money.
Well,
but I ended up at Merrill Lynch for a couple of years, and from there went to a bank in St. Louis. I was a branch manager. And then I moved to LA for film school. So I came out to LA and got my MFA in screenwriting from the American Film Institute. And
that's terrific.
Then ended up back in St. Louis.
You came back to St. Louis. You were living in the executive house, right?
No, when I came back to St. Louis, I was living with my grandparents. I
Oh,
moved back to look after my grandmother. She had been diagnosed with cancer. And
oh,
and then eventually, and then I was married at that point, and started a business, an architectural woodworking business. And that's how I became a woodworker. And didn't know anything about that either. But my ex-husband was interested. He was doing woodworking, and I was interested in running a business. And my dream was to do kitchens and libraries, my two passions. And never, I could never break into that interior design group. It's like a little group that you have to. And so I ended up going after big public projects, and ended at one of the library branches was my first job. And then
really?
the library renovation at the University of Missouri in Columbia. But it kind of grew from there, going after public jobs, and then jobs around the country. And basically, I did jobs from California to Connecticut. Um,
So tell us, where you had an office in St. Louis, is that correct?
yeah, everything was based in St. Louis.
And do you mind sharing? I mean, because people at Crossroads, today as much as before, are very interested in the geography of our metropolitan area.
Yeah, I my shop was down. The first shop was on Shoto, and
Hmm.
then the main shop, the shop I had for most of the years, was on Gratiot, 104 Gratiot, down
Wow.
by the riverfront, and actually behind the flood wall. And I had a 20,000 square foot space there. Um, Actually, the local PBS did a really cool piece on that shop, and showing some of the pieces we made, and because we were even doing part of the Shakespeare sets, and I think at that time we were working on a hospital. But that's on, you can still pull it up online. If you just pull up Druitt's Woodworking, it'll come up, and it's like a 5 minute piece, but it'll give you a tour of the shop and some of the stuff we were doing.
You mean look it up on Channel Nine's website here
No, no, you can just go on YouTube.
on YouTube? Okay,
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
So, how many people were working with you at like the maximum
I
period?
started off with two guys, and
Yeah.
then I built it up to 24. And at
Wow.
that time, the reason I needed 24 was because we were doing simultaneously a project for the lobbies of the federal courthouse. We were doing the Cardinals locker rooms, and we were doing a hotel in Kansas City. So I had this big crew, and we were doing the finishing on two shifts, because it was so much finishing to do and having to move the materials around. So,
So you were doing, among other things, the lobby of the Eagleton Federal Building in St.
not
Louis?
the Eagleton, it was the I can't think the name of it now. Yeah, it'll come to me after the fact.
Okay.
Yeah, we were doing this whole lobby renovation. Um, and we had just finished at the Siteman Cancer Center.
Okay. Right.
Um, we were no, we were supposed to work on the Siteman Cancer Center. That's a whole nother story. We were cheated out of that, but we ended up at the School of Nursing, and there
Okay.
we did the whole interior, including this big 2-story atrium. So
So are you still, does Druid still
no.
exist? I think I hit a nerve, and we don't have to go any further if you don't
Yeah.
want.
No, I'm back to being a struggling writer, back to my passion.
Okay. Okay.
So that's what I do. And last few years, I've taught tons of writing courses, from screenwriting to short stories to memoir writing. Had the most success with memoir writing, teaching a lot of people that. And then just writing on my own. So
Well, that's terrific. And you're with your mom, is that
and
correct?
I'm with I take my mom. I was about to say I'm taking care of my mom, but we're taking care of each other. So we're at that point where it's who's having aches and pains that day.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's who gets the attention. So
I hear you.
yeah.
So, let I want to go outside of our personal bubbles
Mhm.
um and ask you, um A, how you see what's happening in the world now, and B, how it ties in with the experiences you've had. And if it touches on Crossroads, that's great. If it doesn't, that's fine too.
Yeah.
But if you, and let me make it a little more specific. And that would be, would you have ever thought that that 2016 would come along and there would be a Trump in the White House? Okay.
No. Well, I never thought there'd be an Obama in the White House in my lifetime.
Okay. Yeah, that's
So
first.
that was the first big shock. Uh,
Right.
and when that man was elected, um, I didn't leave my bed for a week, and people were like, "Kim, you have to." Um, and there was just this fear I felt, and people were like, "Oh, this is the United States. We have checks and balances. You'll be fine." And I said, "Well, if you're a Black person, you know that you never have checks and balances. They don't apply to you.
Right.
So you might have checks and balances, but I don't have checks and balances." And then people found out that I was right. They don't have checks, and for some reason, this guy was able to just override everything. And so I found it a terrifying time. I would basically wake up every morning waiting to see what had happened next on the news the whole time. And I'm still at that point. I still have that uh, tightness in my chest, the thought that, when he got elected, I told people, when you look at those numbers and realize that basically 1 in 3 Americans voted for him.
Yeah.
And I said, for me as a Black woman, every time I get on an elevator, I'm thinking 1 in 3 people voted for Trump in this
Interesting. Yeah.
elevator, 1 in 3 people in that bookstore or restaurant. That blows my mind. I mean, it just blows my mind. And when I look at the numbers today, it's still, um, it's something I can't also, I mean, I don't even comprehend the people who are in Congress, let alone the whole president. We
Right.
just to move to a world, because when I was growing up, my family was always Democrats, but you had to read. Remember, we had the St. Louis Post Dispatch and the Globe Democrat.
Right.
The Globe was the conservative paper, but my grandparents always said you had to read both because you had to know what the other side. You couldn't just read one paper; you had to read
Good
them
for
both to know
them. Yeah.
what they were thinking. And we moved into a world where, so you thought Republicans were people who were well educated, super well educated, and wealthy. That was how, and now they're pretty much idiots. And there's just no night, I used to have these dinner parties where I was excited about having people who were Republicans, and,
Yeah.
I had everybody there. I had Black people and Jewish people. It just didn't matter. It was the thought that we were having conversations. And we moved to the point where you could no longer have a conversation or a relationship with someone who identified with him.
So let me go back just a little bit.
Mhm.
Uh, November of 2008, Grant Park, Barack Obama had been elected, and you have this tremendous gathering of people, and it's like, wow, we did not necessarily expect this to happen. It's
No.
happening,
Yes.
and he really, by most standards, had a very successful 8 years,
Yeah.
but then rewarded by Trump. What happened? I mean, was there a backlash? What happened?
I I don't think there was necessarily a backlash. I mean, it's like what's going on now with, I'm having this argument with a lot of my Jewish friends about anti-Semitism. And they
Hmm.
think it's this new thing. And I said, it's not new, it's been there. It's just after Trump world, you could come out with it. You didn't have to hide
Hmm.
your craziness anymore.
Right.
And I think that was the same thing with after Obama. People felt free to express what they had been holding back, you know.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't think it was this reaction. The only reaction was now we can say it out loud, the quiet parts.
I had never heard it said quite like that, and it really resonates. I do want to ask you at this point, if you look back and look ahead at what you're doing, is there anything that we haven't touched on here? There's a lot we haven't touched on, but that you want to make sure that we include here.
Uh, no, I'm still remembering the food truck coming at lunchtime and digging in my pocket to see if I had enough because I would bring my lunch, but I still wanted the damn chili in the can. But I just remembered things like that. That just,
Well, do you remember that we had students who were shoplifting from Rod, the food truck guy?
no,
Yes, we did. That I was not in the habit of getting really upset with kids. But
yeah,
that here's this poor guy, you
yeah,
know, trying one way or another to make a living. And we had some people, unfortunately for me, I can't remember who, who were lifting from him. And so we did have a
Wow.
serious talk about that, and I hope it ended. But yes, that was you hear the term food truck all the time now, and it's so different from what we experienced on
Right.
Union Avenue. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I didn't know about that one. So.
Yeah.